You know that you're probably aware of the work that has been complete this year and previous years, but in fact, this is work that we carry out every year, not just at anniversaries or at holidays. This work is being done every day. I think all of you have an opportunity to follow materials that we publish in our social media accounts and the portal of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And to conclude my opening speech, I would like to say that the topic of victory unites us all. Who am I referring to? I'm referring to normal people. We have heard new definitions of normalcy, new ethics, but I believe that there is a standard that should be used in this field. We are normal, we have been normal, or some experiments are being done, or some people have fallen victims to such experiments. And that's what we're talking about. Nazism and fascism are evils. Concentration camps are is a scourge and evil. People were put into these camps on a racial and ethnic basis. People were killed there. That's an absolute evil. It's a humankind's duty to fight against Nazism and fascism, and those who sacrificed their lives to this fight, these people are real heroes. That's the standard that we should use in our work. So many things are being put to question today due to new discoveries and new opportunities, but these are inherent and inviolable values, eternal values, which provide the standard for our work and life. And those who say other things, vice versa, they are not normal. That's the topic of our that's the area of our continuous efforts that we will continue to take in our future. I would like to say a few words about the international activities of the region where we're working today and where we organize our briefing. St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region, we know the consistent efforts by the leadership of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region to expand multifaceted interregional and foreign economic ties with friendly nations, taking into account the realities of the current geopolitical situation. St. Petersburg continues to uphold its reputation as a prestigious venue for major international events. This year it hosted the 28th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, and I recall that it was attended by delegations from 139 states, the 13th St. Petersburg International Legal Forum, attended by representatives of 80 countries, the 12th International Scientific Congress, Sport People Health, attended by 23 countries, the St. Petersburg International Labor Forum, attended by 18 countries, and the 9th International Nevsky Forum, attended by 10 countries. I'm talking about major events, and the list goes on. The regional leadership is systematically working to increase the foreign trade turnover of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region, stabilize the trade balance, and further diversify the structure of foreign trade. We welcome the traditionally high priority regional authorities place on relations with the fraternal Belarus. Working meetings at the level of relevant agencies cover prospects for cooperation in urban planning and public utilities, as well as the opening of the Trading House of the Republic of Belarus in St. Petersburg. In 2025, representatives of the Leningrad region and the Republic of Belarus took part in 18 joint events, held both in person and remotely, dedicated to developing partnerships in the spheres of economy, culture, education, youth policy, and others. In the first half of 2025, the region's international activity focused on constructive interaction with officials and business communities from Abkhazia, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. We support the intensification of interregional ties with these states China remains the primary trading partner for the regions. Chinese companies are showing interest in increasing investment cooperation, promoting products from St. Petersburg manufacturers in Chinese markets, and developing logistics chains. Meetings with Chinese colleagues addressed the organization of joint projects in industry and tourism, cultural exchanges, and the launch of direct flights. And furthermore, information business centers of the northern capital have been opened in Nanting and Qingdao. Cooperation is developing with Iran, Turkey, Myanmar, Brazil, Cuba, South Africa, and Egypt. Ties with Serbia have expanded in the fields of healthcare, education, manufacturing, high-tech tourism, and urban infrastructure. Overall, the Leningrad region and St. Petersburg are leaders in expanding the legal framework for interregional cooperation. New agreements are being concluded with countries that take a constructive stance towards Russia, and corresponding roadmaps for their implementation are being developed. We welcome this results-oriented approach. In addition, St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region continue to maintain close contacts with compatriots in the Baltic states who have faced persecution by Russophobic regimes due to their refusal to adopt an anti-Russian and Russophobic position. Events related to the celebration of the 80th anniversary of the Great Victory and War Memorial Work occupy a special place in the working calendar of these Russian regions, and that's why one of such events is organized in St. Petersburg. Representatives from CIS countries, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America visited the region to participate in commemorative events in order to preserve the memory about the heroic acts of the generation of victors. Siege survivors and veterans living abroad made their contribution to preserving the sacred memory. Participating in the Victory Parade, the Immortal Regiment campaign, festive concerts, and processions, the rapid pace of development of St. Petersburg and the Leningrad region's international context serves as clear evidence that these regions are consistently diversifying their foreign economic ties, actively exploring new niches, and expanding interaction with traditional partners. The shift away from excessive dependence on European markets in favor of strengthening cooperation with the countries of the global majority demonstrate the flexibility and adaptability of the constituted entities of the Russian Federation to the changing geopolitical environment. It's just not just the Russian regions do not want to develop relations and ties with Western countries, but the Western countries themselves have been pursuing a destructive and devastating policy aimed at destroying economic ties and even at blocking ties with Russia and block even Russian ties with the outer world. By doing so, they inflict damage on themselves. That's why we have decided to develop relations with different other countries. In particular, I'm referring to the two regions that are hosting our event today. Now, the schedule of the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, December 8th. Sergei Lavrov will chair the fifth meeting of the Interagency Commission on Caspian Cooperation that will be attended by the leaders of the Russian agencies, ministries, the Russian parliament, and Russian coastal regions of the Caspian Sea, Kalmykia, Astrakhan, and Dagestan. In particular, they will talk about the preparations to the 7th Caspian Summit. On December 10th, Sergei Lavrov will address a plenary session of the Federation Council as part of the government hour on the topic current issues of the foreign policy of the Russian Federation, and will answer questions from senators. Regular meetings between the minister and parliamentarians contribute to the development of interaction between the executive and legislative branches of power on key areas of the country's foreign policy and allow for the effective coordination of efforts to strengthen its role and place in modern international relations. December 11th, the Diplomatic Academy of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs will host the 10th Ambassadorial Roundtable discussion, to which more than 100 ambassadors accredited in Moscow and representatives of international organizations have been invited. The theme of this anniversary event is the Ukrainian crisis, diplomacy, and prospects for settlement. The discussion will be traditionally opened by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. In his remarks, he will provide information on Russian efforts regarding a political and diplomatic settlement of the Ukrainian crisis and share his assessments of the situation in Ukraine. We hope that the upcoming meeting will once again facilitate a trust-based and constructive dialogue with representatives of the world majority countries and pressing issues of the international agenda, with the situation in Ukraine remaining a central focus. And now the situation in Ukraine, which is a traditional part of our briefing. The Kiev neo-Nazi regime continues to commit war crimes and acts of terrorism against Russia. Over the past week, 102 civilians suffered from Banderite shelling and UAV attacks, with 8 persons killed, 94 persons injured, including 7 children. Every time at every briefing, I provide information and facts corroborating such flagrant manifestations of neo-Nazism. So no one outside Russia would doubt that it's a reality. That it's a reality that is being created at that this route is being funded by Western countries, Belgorod region, on November 28th, 29th, as a result of the UAV attacks targeting Dragunska, Arkhangelsk, and Glotova cities. Young woman died, 3 persons were injured, and a 5-year-old child was severely wounded. November 30th, as a result of the UAV attack on Berezovka, Mashane, and Graivoron cities, 2 persons died and 5 were injured. December 1st, as a result of the drone attack on a car, a woman died in Gruska village and her spouse was injured. Kherson region, November 27th, as a result of the attack, 2 persons were injured. November 28th, on the bank of the Dnieper River in Gornostayev district, a 17-year-old man was rescued. He sustained severe wounds due to the Lepestok anti-personnel mine. Bryansk region, November 29th, because of the UAV attack in Strativa village, 2 civilians were injured. On December 1st, Ukraine attacked a territory of Mirator Cargo Industrial Holding by using kamikaze drone. A car driver was injured. Volgograd region, November 29th. As a result of the UAV attack in Volgograd, 5 persons were injured and 4 blocks of flats were damaged. Rostov region, November 29th, as a result of the drone attack on Taganrog. No, there were no victims, but several blocks of flats and dormitories were damaged. The DPR, November 30th, in Donetsk, as a result of the drone attack, 2 persons were injured and the block of flats was damaged. Sevastopol, November 30th, as a result of the drone attack, a 15-year-old girl was injured by the falling fragments of a shot-down aerial target. Dagestan, December 1st, when the UAV attack was repelled in Kaspiysk, a 12-year-old girl was injured. November 30th, we have already commented the attacks by the Kiev regime, by their terrorist attacks targeting 2 tankers, Kairos and Virat in the Black Sea off the coast of Turkey, and infrastructural facility of the International Caspian Pipeline Consortium in the waters of the Novorossiysk port. Well, it seems that Kiev ignored the unequivocal response of Ankara and Astana to those attacks, and on December 1st, they attacked the Russian commercial vessel Medvolga 2 with unmanned ship in the Black Sea, and the attack took place 80 nautical miles away from Turkey. Luckily, Korean vessel didn't suffer serious damage, but these acts of terrorism pursue a single purpose, which is to undermine the peace process and to undermine the security of navigation in the Black Sea. The Kiev regime is terrorist. The Western regimes have been trying to obscure this fact and to hide it from their public, but these facts have become more and more apparent, and they confirm this glaring reality. This is not a natural reality. This is being artificially invented, and it will have a payback. The Russian courts continue to pass sentences on Ukrainian neo-Nazis and mercenaries. We've just provided the information in summary so that our foreign partners and the world majority, by the way, sponsors of this terrorist gang would know the truth. Rostislav Karpusha was sentenced to life imprisonment in absentia for the act of terrorism in Sevastopol on June 23, 2024. He ordered soldiers of the 4th Missile Division of the 19th Missile Brigade of the Armed Forces of the Ukraine. They have launched 6 ATACMS missiles, and this missile, one of the missiles, detonated when it flew over Uchkuisk village in Sevastopol. 4 persons were killed, including 2 children. At that time, 113 persons were wounded. Rostislav Karpusha was put on international wanted list. Ignat Kuzin, recruited by the Ukrainian armed forces, was sentenced to life prison term. He committed an act of terrorism on April 25th, which killed a deputy head of the main operations division of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia, Lieutenant General Yaroslav Moskalik. The Russian Investigative Committee pressed charges against commander of the 108th Separate Assault Motor Rifle Brigade, Sergei Filimonov. Under his command on March 15th, Ukrainian soldiers attacked Zhelane village in the DPR with the UAVs, with the combat UAVs that were equipped with glass tubes containing choking agent. And they did that to ensure the mass poisoning of the population. Just imagine that's the first quarter of the 21st century, and it's being organized by the golden billion living in a beautiful garden. In their degradation, they have descended to sponsoring of terrorists who are using choking agents against civilians. 16 persons were injured because of that. We are working to establish all the facts and to bring all other Ukrainian neo-Nazis responsible to justice. So, but not only Ukrainian citizens are organizing and perpetrating acts of terrorism. There are many mercenaries and international nationals that are being involved in this work. November 30th, the battle group Gattaca that is combating on the side of Ukraine and that is made up of citizens of Romania and Moldova has published a video on Facebook, which is prohibited in Russia. And this video had a title, and I apologize for that. They have named it as Extermination of Lies. In upper right corner of this material, there was an emblem of the 414th Separate Brigade of Unmanned Strike Aviation Systems, Birds of Madhya, they are also known under that name. And there is no, and it is not ruled out that the Romanians themselves were involved in shooting this video. Commander of Gattaca was the call sign Gatodak in interview to mass media, and on his own website we have checked the information, we have all the links. He repeatedly stated that parts of mercenaries are serving in the armed forces of Ukraine as operators of combat UAVs. Our law enforcement agencies are tracking down all the war crimes committed by the armed forces of Ukraine and foreign mercenaries, and we have no doubts that they will be brought to justice. Warmongers continue to provide the armed forces of Ukraine with weapons. On November 27th, Riga reported that they did not report any scientific achievements or some achievements in sports or some new discoveries that are being made in technologies. They have reported about transferring the last batch of Latvian drones, 1,300 drones out of 12,000 drones that they planned to donate to Kiev. At the same day, Zelensky awarded the foreign minister of Latvia, Baibu Braže, with the order of the second extent of the second level for the merits. And the minister also attended the ceremony of transferring for Kiev of 42 armored vehicles, Patria. On November 27th, UK and Ukraine signed a license agreement that will ensure the production of Ukrainian interception drones, Octopus, on British enterprises. And the Ukrainian Defense Ministry informed that the armed force of Ukraine will receive several thousands of UAVs. But yeah, they stated that they need peace. They have been shouting in many platforms and many events, at many mass media presentations and conferences that Russia doesn't seek peace. Well, they have such an interesting pursuit of peace if there are endless weapon supplies of weapons for Ukraine. The same agreement was signed with Norway on November 30th, according to which Ukrainian drones will be produced in Norway. Again, what peace deal we are talking about?
The same document and also on UAVs was signed by Shmyhal on the 1st of December in Brussels with the Netherlands Minister of Defense, Ruben Brekelmans. He declared another package of 250 million euros for purchase of American weapons within the framework of NATO initiative, the list of priority demands of Ukraine. He also mentioned the shipments of F-16 fighter jets. And in autumn, The Hague has already added 500 million euro to this package. So this magnificent bureaucratic machine of Brussels and Tom Renier, official representatives of European Commission, said that national plans of 15 states of the European Union include the support of Ukraine. It's a quotation. He said, I cannot cite the exact sum, but it's about billions, not millions of euros. It's against the background of economic stagnation in the countries and cities of the European Union. And the High Representative on international affairs and security policy, Kaja Kallas, she has lost the sense of reality completely. And today, during the official meeting, a person who has contributed a lot to anti-Nazi, anti-neo-Nazi movements, representatives of Kyrgyzstan, he just mocked the statements by Kallas that allegedly Russia has attacked or is attacking. So she said has attacked 19 times, and some countries maybe attacked several times. He said it was just genius thing. We have been together with Russia for many decades, and we cannot remember Russia attacking anyone. During that meeting, Kallas again accused Russia against the background of peaceful aspirations and them allocating billions and supplying tanks and drones. They're just insolent and they make such statements that Russia does not seek peace. And just think about it. She said Europe has made Ukraine strong to the maximum extent. How could that happen? It's some new normality, some new ethics. So it's the logics, the less family members you have, the more food, the more money you have. So it's just some detrimental logics. That's how they strengthen Ukraine and make it stronger. According to Kallas, less people in Ukraine, the richer and the stronger it is. So more riches and more natural resources per person. But that's Nazism in a new package. Cynical, cold, absolutely immoral. You can say anything under the disguise of this seeking prosperity and under the disguise of care for people. Not without pride, she stated that the assistance to Kiev regime has exceeded 187 billion euros. But she didn't mention to what this aid has led. One more fantastical new thing. On the 27th of November in Kiev, on the initiative of the Zelensky regime, a memorandum with Finland has been signed on the construction of civil refuge facilities. This coalition, in this coalition, Belgium, Ireland, Lithuania, and Sweden participated, and the EU also will be presented there. What's the purpose of this new coalition? The proclaimed aim is increasing the security of civilian population against the background of continuing persisting Russian artillery and missile shootings and creation of shelters, protective facilities in the region. So will those shelters be created on the western side? But your countries, you have allocated money for weapons again for Kiev regime to conduct shootings. And then you start to care for Ukrainian citizens, for them not to suffer, allegedly. But the suffering of response measures, response shellings. But Brussels does not think about that. And Finland has spent just the most money for that, or it has been made to spend. It has been made to accede to NATO, and now it's being made to spend money. It has added 11 million euro to 2 million euro, and Sweden is ready to allocate 7 million euro, Belgium and Lithuania 2 million each. Ireland is also to participate, as well as the European Investment Bank and the World Bank. But you have already built hedges, walls, and against the background of this foreign aid allocation to those corrupted officials on Bankova Street, it's just impossible to believe that those assets, that money will be used for that objective. Now this wall of Yatsenyuk on the border with Russia, it has helped, of course. The same walls have been erected by the Kiev regime and in Donbass, and such defense walls and facilities. Another coalition, it's just some mad project to support Ukraine. It will just become a new scheme of stealing money and enrichment of war lobbyists, war until the last Ukrainian. Now about mobilization age in Ukraine. It has been pronounced again in Ukraine, decreasing the mobilization age. Yuri Kirilenko, the so-called war correspondent, mentioned it at one of Ukrainian TV channels. But just think about it. She said, it's a quotation, a woman has told that. Yulia Kirilenko has said, children will still have to go to war, but you are engaging yourselves I'm talking about the citizens of Ukraine who are servicing the Kiev regime into this dangerous adventure, this beastly war, and you have provided your territory for NATO experiments. You have destroyed the Ukrainian statehood, and now it's endless NATO residents, alien residents in Ukraine. And now the Verkhovna Rada deputy Roman Kostenko, in an interview to NTA channel on the 28th of November, he said that 121,000 people aged between 18 and 22 left Ukraine. It's not total number, but it's only for the autumn period, and it's only this particular age group. Other groups have not been included into these statistics, but you just imagine those numbers. Now in Ukrainian information space, there have been talks about nearly mobilizing women by Zelensky in Ukraine. And this topic was fueled by the Washington Post, which published a story on its website on the 28th of November. It's about the Ukrainian Armed Forces unit consisting of female FPV drone operators. And the heading was, "We will not win this war without women." The media outlet has reported that around 70,000 women are already in the Ukrainian armed forces, and 5.5 thousand of them are performing combat missions. Against the background of desertion that has aggravated after all those corruption scandals, because everyone understands to whom they should sacrifice their lives, not for some motherland, not for Ukrainian people, but for packages with money that are allocated to Bankova by those tranches from the European Union and other countries. Against this background, the news about future possible recruiting of women could be implemented. In order to prolong its existence, the Kiev regime heads are just continuing to sacrifice everyone. Women, young people, it's no difference for them. The Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine has admitted that its policy to destroy the Russian language is not mistaken, but the right one. And according to the European Charter of Regional and National Minorities Languages, it's also about the growth of the use of Russian language, especially among young people. It was confirmed by Yelena Yelanovskaya, ombudsman, and her daughter. You would laugh at that. It's ridiculous. Your daughter is posting on social media in the Russian language. So how does it fit into this policy by the Kiev regime? How have they reached that? It's because they are not normal, because they are insane. It's the extermination of everything that is Russian in Ukraine, despite the protection, alleged protection in their own constitution, Ukrainian constitution of the Russian language. Somewhere Zelensky just vehemently trying to prove it's about NATO, that it's written in the Ukrainian constitution. But you just choose what you implement and what you do not implement from the constitution. Like Vladimir has mentioned, when the fish is packed, and what is about the constitution? What is written about the Russian language? Or have they just let it go by itself, or all those sections of the constitution? So the decision by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, it was obvious the continuation of these destructive lines. It's a testimony of anti-people regime being in power in Ukraine. So people speak Russian, but the regime is destroying as if it's not does not understand that's the language in which the people of Ukraine think and speak. And no one mentions that people should speak just one language, because our country is an example of how people, according to their culture, according to their peculiarities of some geographic area, historic context, to study, to have education in different languages. But what is happening in Ukraine with the language, it's just complete insanity. Of course, such steps testify of any aspirations for peace in Kiev, because it should be cancellation of discrimination with regard to the Russian language and the respect for the right of all the nationalities residing in Ukraine. Now the Kiev regime needs to comply with human rights. But the situation with MIDI, the scandal and that gang corruption scandal just growing in volume in Ukraine. So many international anti-corruption structures have been created, and at a domestic level, it's just not corruption in Ukraine, but some construction sites, something has been stolen, or for education, some budget allocations stolen. It's another thing. It's corruption connected with the war, connected with bloody money, and corruption connected with lawless spread of weapons, but not considered by anyone, not taken into account without any audit. Where is this international community that has just given birth to so many structures connected with international corruption cases and fighting corruption? So where does money come from to Bankova? Those dollars and euros, do they earn them? No, they do not earn them. They just exchange them to the lives of their own citizens. Where does this money come from? From abroad? Who allocates them? If someone has doubts, maybe those allocating this money to Bankova, they are not aware of total corruption in Ukraine. There is just one simple argument against that. In the West, they allocate this money to Kiev. That is why they do not conduct any audits. They do not have any monitoring or analytical mechanisms that could somehow trace where this money goes. And why? Because that's a unified corruption chains. And the facts that have been revealed within the Brussels bureaucracy are just a confirmation of that. Mogherini, she's not just alone. She had just the entire team there working. On the 13th of November in Kiev, near the Literature Memorial House of Mikhail Bulgakov, there was another anti-Russian action. The great writer, he was accused in Ukraine. What do you think he was accused of? He was accused of Russian chauvinism and demand that Ukraine be rid of it. But he is dead. He's no longer alive. What will happen further? Will the books by Bulgakov be burned? But if there is some American film based on Bulgakov's novels, will they ban it in Ukraine? Will it not be allowed? But is a proof of crimes by Bulgakov. Actually, he was born in Kiev. And they used to be proud of him. They used to say that he's Ukrainian, right, actually. But now, that's it. As they say, he's a representative of Russian chauvinism. As a proof of his crimes, the Banderites just quoted his White God novel with negative characteristics of nationalist hetman Pavel Skoropadsky and Simon Petlura. The Ukrainian National Memory Institute, just in brackets, quotation marks, because it's the National Amnesia Institute, actually, qualified Bulgakov in 2024 as a symbol of Russian imperialist policy. I would like just to ask, is it within the framework of decommunization or fighting Russian imperialism? I'm just interested, because they should just somehow choose. So it's just tireless efforts by the Russophobes that are trying to delete, to cut out of public memory any hints of common history of Ukraine and Russia. And there were also statements about the unveiling of sculpture in the Kiev Pечерsk Lavra. Who do you think? Sculpture of whom? Maybe some martyr? No? Hetman Mazeppa. Because now it's a museum, actually, and anything can be built there. So now it's Mazeppa, no other place where he could be erected. But this event, it was just a quotation.
They just called it as the symbol of continuation of the Ukrainian tradition. But it's just humiliating that they put up this monument. It humiliates the memory of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian history. Well, it's quite interesting that they put up that memorial in that place because the Russian Orthodox Church has put anathema on Ivan Mazeppa. That's why putting up a memorial in his honor on the territory of the global Orthodox sacred site is just sacrilegious. Well, they are putting up new heroes. Ivan Mazeppa there. Well, the natural course of history uh, will help the Ukrainian people to oust this Banderite gang. All these facts that I mentioned at the briefing confirm that the objectives to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine, as well as to address threats emanating from from its territory, still hold true. Today in the press center of Россия сегодня there will held a presentation on crimes committed against women and children. And the briefing will be provided by Maxim Grigoriev, Myrkov, many other officials. Andrei Kartapolov, a member of the State Duma. The UN Security Council approved the resolution that calls to fully observe international norms with respect to women and children. Crimes committed by the Kiev regime is a glaring violation of the UN Security Council resolution. The resolution also says that all states bear responsibility for putting an end to impunity and for holding accountable those who are responsible for the crimes of genocide and acts of violence committed against women and children. The report provides a cogent proof of war crimes committed against women and children, which constitute a glaring violation of the Geneva Conventions and the resolution of the United Nations on Women, Peace and Security. We invite everyone to attend this presentation, and this presentation will be available on many platforms of the Russian Foreign Ministry. In many remarks, I've been talking about the price that is being paid by ordinary Europeans for the hybrid war that has been launched by their countries against Russia. They report about the alleged success in the phase out of Russian energy imports. They are so proud of their work. They claim that the phase out of the Russian energy resources is a huge achievement of the European bureaucracy, and it is a guarantee of the EU's security and prosperity. All this is accompanied by contrived speculation that with each new package of restrictive measures targeting the Russian fuel and energy complex, the collapse of our country's energy sector and economy as a whole is supposedly drawing ever closer. Well, they have put a carrot in front of the European donkey, and they say that you need to run faster because you will reach the carrot. The donkey said that it's not strong enough to go, but they say that you need to make a few steps further to reach the carrot. That's what the situation is today in Europe. They were saying, even Obama was saying that our economy is nearing collapse, but it's not true, which is confirmed by trends and facts and reality in general. Well, it is difficult, it is complicated, it is a challenge for us. But what they are saying about our country and our economy is total nonsense. But let's talk about what is going on in their own countries with facts in our hands. The reckless termination of Russian energy imports has seriously hit the European Union itself. Having abandoned well-established energy cooperation with our country, the EU has faced a sharp increase in gas prices and, as a consequence, in electricity prices. This is reluctantly but nevertheless acknowledged within the EU itself. According to official EU statistics, in the first half of the current year, the average household gas price amounted to about 115 euros per megawatt hour. For comparison, previously the average gas price in the European Union fluctuated within a range from 5 to 35 euros per megawatt hour. Well, they can still do the math. If we divide 115 euros by, well, let's take not 5 euros, but if we divide 115 euros by 35 euros, we can see that the difference is 3 or 3.5. But if we're talking about the average price, it has increased dozens by dozens. In other words, the difference is huge. The average figure does not even reflect the gravity of the problem. In some EU member states, a far more dramatic increase has been recorded. In Sweden, 213 euros per megawatt hour. That's how much Swedish nationals should pay for gas and electricity. In the Netherlands, almost 162 euros. In Denmark, about 131 euros. Against this background, it is telling that in Hungary, which continues to import Russian gas on balanced terms, price is comparable to the pre-crisis levels at about 31 euros per megawatt hour. Well, ordinary people have no right to say anything. I think there will be even punished for asking a question. A similar trend is observed in the EU electricity market. In the first half of 2020, the average household price, including taxes, was about 200 euros per megawatt hour. In the first half of 2025, the price began to approach 300 euros. The situation is particularly acute in Germany at about 384 euros, Belgium around 358 euros, and Denmark around 349 euros per megawatt hour. Electricity prices for industrial enterprises in the EU, including taxes, also remain at a very high level. Instead of pre-crisis prices of 80 euros per megawatt hour in the first half of the current year, this figure more than doubled, reaching about 190 euros. The highest prices in the EU are paid by enterprises in Ireland, paying almost 273 euros, and Italy, which pays around 234 euros per megawatt hour. These are not political assessments. These are simple facts. Well, probably the Russian ambassador in Italy will be summoned to the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs because they believe that we have no right to speak about the situation in their countries. If they understand that they are a democratic country, it is normal when people are speaking truth using simple facts. While officials in Brussels credit themselves with progress on the path toward energy independence from our country, ordinary Europeans and EU industry are bearing the heavy burden of financing the geopolitical ambitions of Ursula von der Leyen and her associates. I would like to repeat. These are real funds that are being siphoned off every day by the EU leaders from the pockets of literally every ordinary European. At the same time, European enterprises are forced to pay 2 or 3 times more than for electricity than their American counterparts, and 4.5 times more for gas. This has already led to mass closures of production facilities and their relocation to third countries. Key energy-intensive industry sectors are in deep crisis. Production capacities are being reduced across the board, and EU products are becoming increasingly uncompetitive. The problem of energy poverty is extremely acute. In 2024, almost every 10th European could not afford to heat their home adequately. Moreover, given the European Commission's plans to completely abandon Russian gas no later than, as they claimed, 1 January 1st, 2028, and replace it with more expensive American liquefied natural gas, the European Union will face a further deterioration of the relevant indicators. They even forget to say to their own nationals, because this is not just a more expensive US liquefied natural gas, it will be even more unpredictable. It's not even a fact that they will be allowed to enter any long-term contracts. The Russian Federation in its turn offered to enter into long-term contracts with fixed prices so that they would have an opportunity to ensure their development that will allow us to have profits and to live in peace and coexistence with the European countries. Anglo-Saxons are not going to treat them in a good way. They will hold them, they will provide them gas and electricity as treats to a pet, and once they do something wrong, all the gas imports from the United States will be stopped, even at exorbitant prices. Meanwhile, a wave of cost-cutting and Christmas elimination is beginning across the EU. Cities in Europe are being forced to abandon festive lighting of streets and squares due to a lack of funds to pay for electricity. It doesn't mean that they won't have any festive lights, but there will be less of them due to the lack of funds. The European Union is plunging into darkness in all senses, in all possible ways. But we're just saying that with a small hint, with a small remark that we warned you about it and you didn't believe us. And now a number of news that are related to humanitarian, historical sphere, and international sphere. In Ankara, on November 18th, an opening ceremony of a bust of the outstanding Balkar poet Kaysin Kuliyev was held in one of the parks in Ankara, in Turkey. Kaysin Kuliyev was a laureate of the USSR State Prize, the International Lenin Prize, and the Maxim Gorky State Prize. A veteran of the Great Patriotic War and the author of numerous works, Kuliyev made a significant contribution to world culture and became a vivid expression of the spiritual strength of the Balkar people and of all Russia. The event was attended by the leadership of the Russian embassy in Turkey, the mayor of the Keçiören district of Ankara, creator of the bus, Leon Akhmatov, member of the Union of Writers of Russia, Asker Doduev, as well as representatives of the poets' families, the diplomatic corps, and the local community. We are grateful to the Turkish authorities and the Federation of Caucasian Associations in Turkey for their assistance and participation in the opening of the monument. We are convinced that promoting the works of the Balkar poet in Turkey will contribute to the further strengthening of Russian-Turkish cultural ties. And some news about France. Oleron Island on November 24th, a solemn flowers laying ceremony at the graves of Soviet citizens who took part in the resistance movement during the Second World War was held in France on Oleron Island with the participation of the Russian ambassador Alexei Meshkov and diplomats of the embassy. This year, with the assistance of the Russian Military Historical Society, the tombstones of our compatriots Vladimir Antonenko, Mikhail Yershov, Alexander Kovalov, and Evgeny Krasnoperov, who fell in battle during the liberation of the island, were restored at the cemetery of the town of Saint Pierre de l'Iron. During the war, Oleron was part of the so-called Atlantic Wall, a system of defensive fortification built by the Nazis. Among the imprisoned construction workers, there operated a group of Soviet patriots led by Antonenko, who carried out acts of sabotage and diversion. In particular, they mined and blew up a German gunpowder depot, destroying the island's entire powder stock. Antonenko and Krasnoperov were shot by the Nazis on the day of the island's liberation, just a few days before victory on April 30th, 1945. The fate of the Soviet prisoners of war who joined forces on Oleron with the first wave Russian immigrants is the subject of the documentary film Voices of Oleron, which is available for a wide audience on the internet. It should be noted that the visit of the Russian ambassador to the region provoked outright hysteria among the so-called pro-Ukrainian associations and activists, who even tried to disrupt the commemorative events. Well, they stopped laying flowers at the Soviet war memorials because Shukhevich and Bandera are more interesting to them. Our heroes were not on the side of Bandera and Shukhevich when they were fighting in the Oleron Islands. Well, this is hardly surprising, since the current Banderite regime in Kiev is the ideological heir of those against whom our heroic resistance fighters in Oleron took up arms. It is encouraging that the many local residents, ordinary French people, expressed their indignation to social media and its conversations over attempt to prevent Russian diplomats from paying tribute to the patriots who died for the liberation of the island and of France as a whole from the Nazis. This ceremony became one of the landmark military memorial events organized by the Russian embassy in France in the year of the 80th anniversary of the Great Victory. It is intended to remind people of the significant contribution made by our compatriots to the resistance movements of French territory, of the key role of the Soviet Union in the defeat of Nazism and the liberation of Europe, and of whom France ultimately owes its status as Victorian power. And in Belarus, a monument to Rokossovsky was unveiled on November 26. He The monument was presented as a gift from the Russian Federation to mark the 82nd anniversary of the liberation of the Gomel region from German fascist invaders. At that time, Rokossovsky, a native of Belarus, commanded the Belarusian front and made a significant contribution to the Bagration offensive. The monument shows in metal the 1945 victory parade, which Rokossovsky commanded. The pedestal marks the sites of key battles during the liberation of the Gomel region in 1943, while the base of the sculpture depicts images of Nazi standards, thrown at the foot of the mausoleum on Red Square in Moscow. In his welcoming address, chairman of the Russian Military Historical Society, Vladimir Medinsky, emphasized the unity of the peoples of Russia and Belarus, who just as in the harsh years of the Great Patriotic War, stand shoulder to shoulder to ensure the defense and security of our common Union state. He underscored the importance of preserving the historical memory of outstanding military and state figures in order to convey the truth about the heroic past to future generations. Belarusian speakers at the ceremony noted the unshakable nature of the historical brotherhood between Russians and Belarusians, which has withstood a centuries long test of time, trials, and victories over common enemies. At the same time, it was noted with regret that, unlike Belarus, to the west of the Union state border, a systematic and relentless campaign has been ongoing for many years to destroy the Soviet memorial complexes and barbarically erase pages of the history of the Great Victory with the aim of denigrating the liberators and whitewashing war criminals. On the day of the unveiling, quality of the event's organization and the landscaping of the area adjacent to the monument, we intend to continue our active joint efforts to perpetuate the memory of our great ancestors. And now another announcement, quite an important international information on December 8th. Recall it will mark the 34th anniversary of the signing of the agreement establishing the Commonwealth of Independent States. This document played a truly historic role preventing the severance of centuries-old ties between the Union republics and their peoples and laying down sustainable principles for interaction among the newly independent states. The Commonwealth is the most representative organization in the post-Soviet space in terms of membership. Projects are being implemented within the CIS framework in virtually all spheres: political, economic, cultural, and humanitarian, as well as security. Coordination of positions on pressing issues on the international agenda is actively